So ladies, gentlemen, fellow Bat family out there, I can't believe it, but it's been 3 months
You're out of your goddamn mind.
since the previous one, and it feels like deja vu because I feel like I say this each and every Batverse discussion series episode in how it's been quite a while, but it's been since my honeymoon, which kind of means if I leave a similar amount of time between this one and the next discussion series, well, I'm kind of hoping that we could have some official Batverse news. But if you're brand new here, by the way, hello, welcome. This is the Batman discussion series where we talk about anything and everything Batverse related for the Batman 2 spinoffs. I've got some questions, some general kind of stuff to go over from you guys, but also I asked you for some of your top wants for the Batman Part 2, of which I did like a Part 1 video around over a year ago now, so I wanted to get into some of your top wants again, overall do a big Batverse blabbery discussion series. I hope you guys enjoy it. I know we're kind of very much so in between things in the Batverse, but hey, we have to try and keep the hype train going for those who are as hyped as us. A little hub of discussion. But let's get into, the first screenshots I have for a couple of general things is Mandy Hess here saying, I just want to see the Batman 2 began filming today. That's all I care about at this point. And then we have LSD420 saying, I'm not celebrating until that script is officially turned in, which I think is a good space to start some discussion because I see lots of people talking about, okay, well, what about the script? We heard that rumor that it was supposed to be handed in by Memorial Day, which was in May, and some people were dunking on that because we didn't hear about it. That means it never happened. Well, that's not strictly true. I suppose, grain of salt, right? That was a rumor. We don't know if it actually was ever going to be handed in by Memorial Day, but around about that time, what I said was very reassuring, despite that being a rumor, was literally around that time James Gunn responded to a fan over on Threads saying, is there any updates on the Batman 2, any encouraging updates? And he replied, yes. Secondly, I do want to say the script could still have, that rumor could have been true and the script could have been handed in on Memorial Day, but just because it's handed in, that doesn't mean you're going to get like a deadline or the Hollywood Reporter article, headline, announcement for the Batman Part 2 there and then. Maybe the script had some notes. Maybe Matt Reeves has still got some, crossing his T's, dotting the I's, so to speak. But having said that, as I said, by the time I do another one of these, technically speaking, if everything is going according to plan, if there is encouraging stuff going on behind the scenes of Part 2, according to the co-head of DC Studios, James Gunn himself, and everything we're hearing behind the scenes, by the time I make another one of these, it should technically be around about the time or after we've actually had some more tangible stuff. Like the script has been greenlit and pre-production is underway. I think my biggest takeaway recently, believe it or not, is just James Gunn saying that there is encouraging news behind the scenes. So it's just we're in that very kind of somewhat preliminary stage, hopefully right on the precipice of news like this coming out very soon. So Guy the artist says, it's not the Batman Part 2 if the visionary is gone. Now I believe this is a response to me entertaining the idea that the Batman Part 2 could have still have technically gone forward even if they found another director to step in for Matt Reeves. And the reason why that was entertained is because of the personal situation that's been happening behind the scenes with Matt Reeves. So this was said at a time of when we didn't have some of the more recent updates, and that was being, explored. So I was like, you know what? Obviously, we'd love Matt Reeves, but I'm sure even if they found another director, he would work very closely with them, and we'd still get a very true to his vision, the Batman Part 2, because he would have still written it. All of the little pieces and components that would have gone into making the Batman Part 2 would have still have largely have been the same, and I still believe Matt Reeves would have collaborated very closely with whoever they would have found. The thing is, I've gone away from that idea because of what James Gunn has recently said. Not only did he say that there's been some encouraging updates behind the scenes, when a fan asked him, is Matt Reeves still directing? He was like, yes, huh? Now, I don't think there's any world in where James Gunn doesn't know what Matt Reeves is dealing with behind the scenes. I know we're still being ambiguous about that, but again, that's Matt Reeves' own personal business. But the point I'm trying to make is, I don't see why Gunn would reply publicly, being like, yes, huh? As in, of course, he's still directing. Why are you even asking this? Because they must have had a conversation behind the scenes in where, like, James Gunn knows Matt Reeves still fully intends to direct The Batman Part 2, despite the personal stuff that is going on. Now, up next from Calamity Michael 8756, the problem here is The Batman is supposed to be a movie about Batman's early years when he was young. Robert is going to be in his 40s when they make this new film. They gotta stop waiting so long. I don't care about age, but these are supposed to be his early years. Now, I totally get what you're saying here because a lot of people share these concerns. You know, Robert Pattinson turned 39, I believe, in May. So yes, if filming happens around March, April-ish next year, he will be turning 40. But the thing is, I don't see this as a concerning thing. I know that might be shocking to some of you, but the good thing about Robert Pattinson is that he's aging very, 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 very well. And I don't believe for a single second that if you got Robert Pattinson today with the exact same hairdresser, barber who like cut his hair, the exact same makeup artist, the same drifter outfit on the same set, I don't think he would look any different. If you believed that Bruce was around 30 in the first movie, whether you believed it or not, like that's the way it was. I know that they can make Pattinson look exactly the same in Part 2. So as a result, it doesn't concern me. Like, if you're okay with him looking 30-ish in Part 1, and that's how old he was supposed to basically be, and you know he will look the same in Part 2, then I don't see the issue here, despite the fact that in real life he will be turning 40 during the filming for Part 2. I think this is a non-issue, despite the logic some people are going with. Now, up next from David Watts N70. Oh, I almost forgot. Deadline confirmed that The Penguin is indeed a limited TV show, meaning it will not get renewed for a second season. I've seen quite a few people post this, but I really don't think that's the case at all, or it's being misunderstood. But not only that, you've had Lauren LaFranc come out after this saying, we're literally exploring how and if we can make season 2 work. We don't want to force it kind of thing, but we're mining the ore vein of story ideas, meaning they are literally exploring season 2. Now, you raise a good point, like in how The Penguin is a limited series. The thing is, obviously, with The Penguin being nominated for more awards, like the Emmys, they don't want to necessarily come out and kind of go crazy with saying, oh yeah, we're doing season 2. Like, I'm not saying that they have written scripts right now. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying they don't want to be like, oh yes, we're definitely doing it, when that kind of would make these awards not as applicable because you're literally fully planning and have said you're doing as season 2, which thus makes it no longer a limited series. Because again, The Penguin has been nominated for Outstanding Limited Series, with Colin Farrell being nominated for the Best Actor in a Limited Series alongside Kristen Milioti. So, yes, don't be fooled by that. Yes, it's a limited series right now, but if they do indeed come to an idea of what they want to happen in The Penguin Season 2, which I am hearing behind the scenes is very much so the plan, it's just they're not going to kind of shout from the rooftops about it for quite some time. So Larry Peavy 4170 says, if the Batman 2 is shooting in March, is there still a winter theme? I believe that will still be the case. Plus, anyway, if they wanted to do snow, it would most likely be artificial snow and things like that. And there's all kinds of post-production they can do to, give the winter vibe. So honestly, yeah, even if it starts filming, like principal photography truly begins around March, April, May next year, there's plenty they can do to still keep it on track to, and I don't want you guys to forget what Matt Reeves was saying. He was saying that the story of the Penguin takes us and into the Batman right up until Christmas. And like when he was talking to that interviewer, he says, we haven't quite got to like New Year's yet or whatever. When you read between the lines of all of that, it does seem to be, and a lot of us are hoping, that the events of the Batman Part 2 could take place over perhaps a week period from Christmas to New Year's. And that would be sick. That would be ultimate peak. I need it. And that can still be the case. Yeah, I don't see why not. Now, going over to a top want for Part 2 here. This one's from Coconut Person saying, Give me a Robin origin story for once, not some grown adult playing the character, but an actual 13-year-old orphan Dick Grayson who Bruce adopts and guides. The Batman Part 1 was all about building up Batman, so Part 2 should be about building up Bruce Wayne, and forcing him to guide a kid who is as traumatized as him is the perfect first step for it. And I've had a lot of people say stuff like this over the years. Now, as for your comment about an actual 13-year-old orphan Dick Grayson Robin, I truly feel like a comic bookish accurate age for a Robin will be in the DCU. I've always said when it comes to Matt Reeves' world, if you want to do a Robin, or if we want to hypothetically entertain that they would actually do that, I don't think it would be a kid Robin in this world. I really don't. DCU is going to do that. My favorite example is Kick-Ass with like Hit Girl and stuff. I feel like James Gunn will have no issues making sure Brave and the Bold's Bat family, if there is a Robin, they would have been kids. Now, I do understand how it is a top want, though. Truly. Like, there's something really cool and visceral about Matt Reeves' world and Bruce going through the journey he did in Part 1 to realizing that he needed to become something more, and he's got a bit more of a purpose now, or at least knows how to apply the criminological experiment even better in Part 2. So you could see that wisdom that has been, growing in Part 1 also turn into something new in where he guides a Robin. That, don't get me twisted in terms of, if I could just, click my fingers and have, divine power to just see the Batman Part 2, a version of it where I see literally Pattinson acting alongside a kid who is Robin, just for the sake of seeing it, I would. That would be really cool. But do I think it's going to happen? I just don't. I don't. Now, I will add in one little thing in how if we do get a Batman Part 3 and it's not going to end with Part 2 or anything like that, if we do get the full epic crime saga trilogy, I wouldn't be surprised if, let's just say, Pattinson's Batman doesn't die and we get a Dick Grayson teased by the ending of the whole trilogy, but it's not necessarily something we will see. I know, you could argue a vigilante bat in of itself is a form of being fantastical, and that's what Matt Reeves has said, that's probably the extent of fantastical they're going to go, but bringing in an actual teenager kid Robin into that world, it really takes it that next level. But in the DCU, it's you can do all of that because we completely and utterly suspend our disbelief there. Now, for Matt Reeves' Batverse, I don't think you suspend your disbelief nearly as much as you would with the DCU, and I think that's obviously a fair comment to make, because, again, you suspend your disbelief with the idea of there being a vigilante, because obviously that's still not quite something we see in our real world, like somebody in New York dressing up as a bat, going out, using all these gadgets, nobody knows who he is. So you suspend your disbelief there, and maybe with a few other things. But overall, it's still, despite how comic booky and how amazing of a job James Chinlund did with the production design to this, that, and the other, and how Matt Reeves really gets Batman and does it so faithfully, you don't have to suspend your disbelief. You can believe that Barry Keoghan's Joker is still a serial killer who didn't actually have to fall into a chemical vat to become that guy. You can believe how the Riddler came to be. You can believe the corruption in the city. But dialing it back to Robin, I just think, again, that would require too much of a suspension of disbelief, taking on the kid and putting him in danger in those ways that I don't think Matt Reeves is going to adapt that angle of Batman, despite us reading that as a part of Batman in the comics and different mediums such as animation, TV shows, or other movies, and other movies that we will see in the DCU's future. So it's a bit of a broad answer and a broad thing to study there. But ultimately, there are different takes on Batman, and despite how faithful this one is, it's just not going to lean into the faithful aspects, going down the rabbit hole of being all-out fantastical. And a kid Robin is pretty damn fantastical, believe it or not. Now, the next top want here from Jack Fitzgerald, 1808, really kind of made me think, you know what? Absolutely, I want this as well. I want the Batman Part 2 to end on a downer note. Truly be the second act of a 3-part story, just like The Empire Strikes Back. Absolutely. At the end of Part 2, it would be pretty damn good if it ends with, like, borderline, I don't know if I quite want to say, like, a broken bat, but, like, Bruce has been pushed to, like, his current brink at that point, and he's thinking, how am I, like, what the... Now, Empire Strikes Back obviously ends in such a way where Luke is kind of got his new hand, they kind of look out, and it's like, oh my god, you know, I've got this new information that Vader's my dad, all of this stuff, but we've also got a whole crucible to still yet go through. You could still, mirror that way onto the Batman, and where it's not like he's there with a broken bat suit, but he's kind of like knows what he's up against. This is going to be a big hurdle ahead. Obviously, as a result of that, ends on a downer note in such a way where it's truly something to be reckoned with. Something that's not going to be easy. I think that should be the way. Like, truly, if they are going for that 3-movie thing, and I know that's the plan, I only say this with the speculation of, like, if Matt Reeves is allowed to do part 2, but somewhere behind the scenes, the speculation of, like, what if it ends with part 2, because really after that they just want to focus on the DCU's Batman, but they're going to give Matt Reeves part 2 at least. I think Matt Reeves will maybe do something like that, but also without making it so blatant of a setup. I know that kind of contradicts what I've just said, but you know how the Batman works as a movie in of itself, but can continue on into part 2. I think Matt Reeves will probably have that same vision in terms of, just in case they don't get a part 3, he doesn't want to leave it in such a blatant place where it's like, oh my god, if this doesn't continue, it will feel like a weird ending, because it's so easily begs a part 3. So I think something will be set up in the similar ways to how you had this ambiguous looming, you know, future rogues threat with the Riddler and Joker, Gotham Loves a Comeback story. Matt Reeves has even talked about how he wanted to keep that in there because it shows you, despite the Riddler being put away, despite Gotham having gone through this whole plot, there's still more looming. There's still more coming in Batman's future, right? And stuff like that. So I think you're going to have similar teases, but it would be dope if one of those was so, like, you know, crazy to behold for a part 3. The Court is a good example because despite whatever Batman goes through and triumphs through in part 2, like part 1, if he realizes that there's a whole deeper layer to everything, despite what he's already achieved in part 1 and through whatever part 2's plot will be, that is almost a downer note in the sense of Batman's got so much more to do, and he's just had this mystery unraveled to him where it's like almost incomprehensible. So there's your downer note, but you still feel the satisfaction of, okay, I'm going to tackle that in the future, but I'm satisfied through the arc I went through in this movie. So something overwhelming being introduced would probably be a good way to do it. And the Court of Owls, you know, making Bruce and Batman question everything he's ever really even believed in about Gotham that he knows like the back of his hand being completely flipped on its head would be a compelling continuation of things that you could explore if we get a part 3, but also kind of a downer note in the sense that Batman has still got so much more work to do in the city, and this could be his greatest challenge yet. I don't know, though. I'd love to know your thoughts on that. So continuing on from a theory we were talking about a few months ago, Jonathan Bunting 7010 says, Edward Nashton was already an orphan and already at the orphanage before reporter Edward Elliot was killed, because he was at the orphanage when Thomas Wayne was giving that speech, and Elliot died right before Wayne did. And I completely agree with that. It's just, I think we entertained it in the previous video in the sense that there was it's almost as if Edward Nashton was written to be Edward Elliot's son, but then they changed it kind of thing. But like in all reality, yes, that's absolutely correct. Plus, you know, getting into the broader theories of this, I think we would all agree and all want the actual son of Edward Elliot to be Thomas Elliot. Now, I know there's all kinds of different opinions as to whether a Thomas Elliot should emerge in the Batman Part 2 as Hush, because people always say, but, you know, there's too many similarities with the Riddler and Hush and all this, that, and the other. I disagree with that. I get what people are saying with the whole Batman Hush thing and how Riddler in that storyline wanted to prove that he was like so great as a villain that he could kind of do it again as a different villain, so he became Hush. And that doesn't mean that Thomas Elliot couldn't emerge with some weird retribution on the Wayne name, but I think that's my very issue with it, is what they would write in a way that would be a good story. Like, I kind of get it. Okay, my dad died. This has been exposed to Gotham, thus I've learned about it. So now I'm going to go after Bruce, but there's not too much motivation there other than, well, yeah, I guess you could say Thomas Elliot, the son of Edward Elliot, grew up without his father, and thus he has his own form of trauma that Matt Reeves wanted to explore, and it diverged in such a way where instead of becoming a symbol of good like Bruce did with his own trauma, he, as per all the rogues galleries and all these other characters, have their own trauma that led them down these darker paths. And so I want to go kill Bruce now. It's just there's not enough oomph there. But then again, I'm not Mattson Tomlin and Matt Reeves writing the Batman Part 2. They've been they've had ideas cooking for years now. So let's just hypothetically say, and here's my challenge to you, that Matt Reeves and Mattson Tomlin have genuinely written a script for the Batman Part 2 that centers around that Easter egg of Hush, where Edward Elliot, the reporter's son, Thomas Elliot, emerges in present day. What would your story be there? If you know a bit about Hush, how would you make this refreshing? How would you not make it kind of lame in the sense that, oh, I'm just going to go after the surviving son of Thomas Wayne and kill him, even though he had nothing to do with Thomas Wayne's actions that led to a series of events that killed my father? But I'm still going to go after Bruce anyway? Like, just that's where it falls apart for me, despite all of the recurring rumors about how it could still maybe be Hush as a villain in the Batman Part 2. I just can't really get round that one. So Shaka Phillips 2444 says, I want to see Bruce doing more missions in his Drifter outfit. It was cool seeing him navigate the first film at night with that outfit. Imagine Bruce operating in an armed building in his Drifter outfit using stealth. That would be dope. In regards to villains, if done right, I'd love to see Bruce battle two villains. One in his Bruce Wayne persona and Batman persona. Hush, aka Thomas Elliot, is Bruce's villain, and maybe Freeze his Batman's villain. So that is something that more Drifter, absolutely. It would be cool to see, as you suggested, more of him. You know how we saw him burst into the Iceberg Lounge and then he punched that guy out and then got changed straight away into the Batman suit. It would be cool to see, like, that more, actually going into a place, getting changed quick, or remaining in stealth mode like that. But then again, if you're doing stealth mode, I kind of would rather see it in the Batsuit, because that's been a big one from all of us fans, and is to see more, kind of more Arkham game stealth moments that they could absolutely pull off. But I absolutely love the idea of Bruce Wayne having, a villain, as well as Batman having a villain. And coming right off of the back of the Hush discussion there, maybe Hush wouldn't be as big as what I was trying to make it out to be in my head. Maybe he can be uniquely a villain to Bruce Wayne's side, which would nicely complement what is naturally going to happen in the second movie, and what Matt Reeves is heavily implied is going to happen in the second movie, by seeing a side to Bruce that we haven't seen before, Batman, and that is, well, Bruce Wayne. We're going to see more Bruce in the second film. So a way to navigate that would be what we've been talking about on previous discussion series, is the fact of the Wayne name being tarnished. So maybe Hush, Thomas Elliot, coming out into public a lot more, wanting more answers as to what really happened to my dad. Did Thomas Wayne got him killed? That's the way the Riddler presented it to Gotham, as I've rambled about in the past. So it wouldn't necessarily be a traditional Hush villain in the ways that we've maybe made it up to be in our heads, but it would be a villain for Bruce to encounter publicly, because as we've talked about in the second movie, he's got a lot of restoring of the Wayne name to do. Like, not only is he going out as Bruce Wayne more, that we can absolutely borderline guarantee at this point, but there's no way that you're not going to have some kind of plot thread picked up with the fact that Riddler broadcast that message that, Batman was watching in the Batcave to the whole of Gotham, and not have anyone ask about, wait, your dad got somebody killed, he was in cahoots with Falcone to get that guy killed. To have maybe the son of Edward Elliot, Thomas Elliot, go on the news and try and, demand answers from Bruce Wayne. Not that Bruce would necessarily have all these answers, but still have it being investigated all of these years later, maybe a murder case is reopened in the wake of that, would still add an interesting situation for Bruce Wayne to deal with in public, while he's got all of this Batman stuff going on behind the scenes. If anything, that would make it harder, right? If he has a bit of a spotlight on him and people are paying a bit more close attention to Bruce Wayne when he needs to get out there and be Batman, I kind of really like, I'm not saying we have all the ideas like lined up there, but I like where we're going with that, and how that's the first time I think I've really thought about Hush being in the second movie in a way that is really believable. Now, Smallville 74 raises something which it might be a bit of a hot take, but I kind of agree with. And he says, I personally just want Pattinson to keep his suit relatively the same. No color changes or anything serious. Now, hold on. I'm not saying that I would be against some kind of new suit, but I think I just love the design of this suit so much that we've got that I would be worried that I just won't like whatever they do with it. Plus, this one already is so protective, It tanks bullets as per, you kind of need it to if you're only human after all. But we know his cowl is bulletproof. We know his armor is bulletproof. Maybe, there could be, as many people were suggesting, there could be upgrades with the fact that he's got the wingsuit. Maybe that could become more of a glider. But I think that I love the cowl so much, the way it fits Pattinson's like skeletal structure and everything, that if they just completely changed it up material-wise, will it look worse? I don't know. If they change up the whole torso, will that not look as cool? That's my fear, I think. So if it looks so good already, don't get me wrong, like maybe you could do a couple of things new with it, but I am also in the camp of, I really wouldn't mind if they kept it relatively the same. And it was more of what I feel like what Matt Reeves might do, is that between Batman movies, I'm not saying the suit would never change in theory in Batman's career, but they might do more of a James Bond thing where he pretty much usually wears a suit, right? But what does he get? New fancy gadgets and toys. So maybe the Batmobile gets a new upgrade. Maybe that gets a new gadget or something that can stop Penguin's car in a more interesting way. Maybe a grapple hook on the actual Batmobile. That'd be pretty cool. Things like that. Maybe gadgets that help him become more stealthy, as we've been over a billion times before. Hey, he exploded that pipe, it caused smoke. Hey, I'm gonna actually bring smoke pellets out with me now. But as for the suit itself, does that need to change? It doesn't need to, but will it? I know I sound so, like, almost daft here, because some of you might be so sure that, Boba, of course they're going to give us some kind of new suit. And in some ways, I'm not saying you're wrong. It almost feels like, well, of course they are. Like, even for the sake of, on the back side of things, merch, there could be new statues, new figures, all of that stuff is quite often another reason why you get new designs in comic book movies. But I'm just saying, I really wouldn't be surprised if, like, the core aspects of the Batsuit remain the same. So I guess, again, to flip it around on you guys, do you really think, A, they're going to give you a new suit? B, if it is a new suit, do you think they're going to dramatically change it? Or do you think it's going to stay relatively similar, but with maybe a couple of color changes, or something as simple as maybe removing the collar, but doing something a bit different somewhere else, but keeping mostly everything else the same? Or do you think there's going to be, again, like a massive cowl change, keeping the collar but making the cape different, changing the kind of shoulder pauldrons and the bats? Like, there's something about me that doesn't quite buy the extent of that. I don't know. I need to hear from you guys. Like, tell me realistic predictions that you would, like, bet money on. Now, up next is from Buster Barnes saying, I loved the Penguin Season 1, but would rather they did a new limited series starring another character than forcing a Season 2. For example, they could do a Catwoman series, which could still feature Oz and Sophia, etc., but have Selina be the main focus. So, first of all, I want to say that I'm not saying you're saying they are forcing a Season 2, but I don't think they will, nor do I think they would have to, because I am firmly in the camp of, even though it was initially a limited series, that there is absolutely story to mine there. Now, as of if they will absolutely make that decision and go through with it, still remains to truly be seen. However, Oz being the Kingpin represents a whole new host of challenges. He still has to keep a lid on all the gangs of Gotham, of which have all had their own little mutinies and have new leaders, so that shows ambition in of itself, right? Now, sure, they might respect Oz as the new Kingpin, because they've just come into their own new position, right? So they don't want to rattle the cage too much, but still, there's a little bit of, ambition that could bleed over to where they might think, well, I could be the new Oz, because he came from being a right hand to the new Kingpin. I went from being a right hand to the new gang leader. So you see where I'm going with that. But then, all while he's doing all of that, furthering his empire in the criminal underworld, and sure, there might be rivalry stuff that he has to deal with, some who do choose to try and take issue with Oz and his leadership. He has his plan of owning both sides of the city. The criminal underworld down here, and then on the flip side, City Hall, in where he could become a councilman. And once you're embedded in that, so not only are you the Kingpin, but you're in the legal ruling side of thing to the borderline point of where you could do a Mayor Oswald Cobb story. Now, I'm not saying we're going to get straight to Mayor Oz Cobb, but the fact remains that he was talking to Councilman Haiti about being welcome in a place like this. So becoming a man of power, becoming a councilman in of itself would be crazy. I think what they could do fundamentally in Penguin Season 2 is absolutely not forget about the criminal underbelly. Absolutely not. That will be decorated throughout all the episode, peppered in there. But I think what they're going to do, if they do it, is they're going to show the other half of gangsters out there, and that is those who wear the suits in City Hall. Because don't forget that just because you're you may be a councilman or whatever, DA or whoever you are, right? We've seen how people like that can be corrupt. I mean, look at, Councilman Haiti. He was talking and basically working with Oz, and now he's done him a favor and he's got him into City Hall in one way or another. These are different types of gangsters that you need to navigate. These are people who are corrupt and do bad things as well. We've all seen that. We've seen that with the previous mayor who was murdered, Gil Colson, the DA who was murdered. But there are still people like Councilman Haiti there. And not only that, not only are you going to have rivals in that way who might not like Oz Cobb coming into the City Hall atmosphere of things, but you're also going to have the good guys, like District Attorney, the new DA-elect Harvey Dent. What about that? People like him, who's not a gangster, but who absolutely can see how Oz is slithering his way like a snake into the cracks of their institution. So I think that could be it's still very much so a crime, saga spin-off with the Penguin, and it could still be very visceral. You can still imagine Oz doing some nasty things to people in City Hall, and those who threaten his vision, and it could get nasty as well. There could be assassination attempts. He could try and do flybys on certain, put pressure on people. Do you remember when he got the bloody pliers on Councilman Haiti's nose? And then again, as I said, if they did something as wild as, having Harvey Dent introduced in that show, I guess it depends if the movie comes out first or Penguin Season 2. But I've said that a way to do Harvey Dent in a much longer format of storytelling rather than just having him in the movie like The Dark Knight and he becomes Two-Face just like that. Have him as the antagonist to Oz Cobb in Penguin Season 2. His own antagonist. You get hours of Harvey Dent there. You get to see more of his cracks in personality. You get to see his thirst for justice and doing what's right, but also being tempted to bring out Big Bad Harv in moments. And Oz kind of brings that out of him. So by the time you see him in the Batman 2, or whether you saw him in the Batman 2 first, you see this further explored to the point of when you see the acid thrown in his face in the courtroom. I think that is gold, and I'm not saying I'm on point there completely, but Penguin Season 2 is absolutely, they've teed themselves up for even more drama, because the power, there's managing your current power and all the interesting things that come with that in the criminal underbelly, but the stuff they can do on the official capacity side of things would be epic as well. Now, I know that was a big ramble about that, but absolutely. Lauren LaFranc, even not too long ago, said they are exploring other spin-offs they can do that aren't contingent even on a second movie. So she's basically saying that we don't have to worry about the timeline of the Batman Part 2. We're kind of exploring what other characters we could do there. So, like, you know, for example, you could do Jonathan Crane. Technically isn't contingent on the second film. Maybe he's a new hire at Arkham Asylum, Arkham State Hospital. And so you could explore that and maybe go in to borrow some of the original ideas that they had for that once pitched Arkham spin-off show that was set in the Batverse. So I'm game for both. I'm just saying, I'm very gung-ho about Penguin Season 2. I know they could do it, and it could be sick. I don't think it will be forced either. It won't be milking it for milking its sake. I'm very confident about that. And I think there's really interesting directions they can take it with, you know, even like kind of mirroring corruption in the real world with people like Oz who get into places like those, you know, city institutions. But also, I would die to have another Batverse spin-off. Now, would I want it to be Catwoman or some other character, which would most likely be a Rogues Gallery character? That is a tough one. Now, Catwoman, you can do a lot of things there, absolutely. Maybe I'm just biased, but I think I would like to see some other kind of Rogues Gallery thing. But I think the innate thing for me there is, but whenever I think about, okay, a Professor Pig thing, okay, a Scarecrow thing, I kind of want Batman to be involved. And they did say that they wouldn't rule out Batman appearing in the future. But I think what I need to remind myself of there is, we had the Penguin series without Batman in it. And it was a great kind of character exploration, right? You know, seeing Oz go from the beginning to the journey of power that he obtained to betraying Victor like that. It was all done without Batman. Literally only a bat signal at the end of the bloody show. But they could try and still revive something like the GCPD show. Maybe do something with Jeffrey Wright at the helm of it, but still tackles a character as an antagonist like Professor Pig. So you have like an 8-episode limited series, Batman's busy, it's not necessarily contingent on Part 2, but you follow Jeffrey Wright or some GCPD officer like as per the original GCPD Batverse series, where you still very much so explore this crazy character who they're trying to go after. Maybe it could be a prequel like that show was originally meant to be. And not only that, another reason why I think we shouldn't take a revival of an abandoned show off the table is because of how well HBO's The Penguin did with all of these awards as well. They're probably looking at that now being like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have tossed that. And Matt Reeves has probably got them eating out of his hands with regards to how they might want to throw more money at him, so long as it's like maybe another successful show like that. So I know I'm rambling at this point, but what I want to say is I think maybe that would be one of my go-to ones. Other than Catwoman, it would be something like approaching the idea of the GCPD show again. That way you can bring in an unknown Rogues Gallery character. As of right now, insert Rogues Gallery character here, while still getting in systemically into Gotham, the GCPD, and various characters like that. And you could have characters like Jeffrey Wright pop up in it. But let me know, guys, and I think that's enough waffling on from me today. So let me know your thoughts on everything that I discussed. As always, I read all of your comments, and I love especially reading the Batverse discussion series comments. So any theories you got, guys, any expansion on what I said, shoot it down in the comments below. If you got this far, please consider liking the video, as it really does just help support the channel. And until next time, you know, and that next time could, I don't want to jinx it, so double fingers crossed, could be when we actually have a little bit more tangible information on the Batman 2, if that's in 2 to 3 months' time. But until next time, guys, really appreciate you watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you, Bat Family, in the next video. Goodbye.